The following conversation is with Robert Mosqueda. Robert is a senior project manager in the construction industry with over 15 years of experience. In this episode, we talk about in-depth of MEP systems as well as bonding and general lack of innovation in the construction industry, as well as some of his pursuits outside of work. The construction industry has not seen the innovation that it deserves. My goal with this podcast is to bring best people in the construction as well as the technology world to find areas in which we can innovate for a better future. And here's my conversation with Robert Mosqueda. What is MEP? What does it stand for? What does it include? What does it not include?
Okay. Well, let's start high level, okay? First things first, construction is a multi-billion-dollar industry, right? Without construction, we wouldn't have infrastructure. Without construction, we wouldn't have places to live, places to do business, roads to drive on, that kind of stuff, obviously. With that being said, I got into construction because I've always been a real hands-on type of guy. You quickly learn that there's many parts of construction, okay? For those who are from the outside looking in, a lot of people just think of like hammer and nails and wood, and that's just like the basic. When you think of construction, you just think of the things that you can see, the tangible things. But there's also a part of construction that I consider basically the organs or the inside of the human body as it relates to construction, and that's the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems.
Right. That's what
which is what MEP stands for. Right. When I got involved with 960, which is the project that we were working on together, I was slated to be the MEP senior project manager. For whatever reason, that's kind of the position that I was put into. It definitely isn't my expertise, that's for sure.
Okay.
Surprisingly, even though Dish seems to think it is, it really isn't. I'm not a mechanical, electrical, and plumbing expert, but I know a lot about it, that's for sure.
But you know enough to run a team, to communicate with the subcontractors, to do the work, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
You wouldn't be hired if you didn't know what you were doing.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, as a general contractor and a senior project manager in the industry, you tend to be, you know a little about a lot of things. Mm-hmm. I don't consider myself an expert on any of the facets of construction. I really don't. But I do know a lot about MEP systems. That's primarily because of my background.
Okay.
So from a high level perspective, for those who don't know construction, just think of MEPs as the organs of the human body and kind of what allows things to run, if that makes sense.
Right. What is your role as a senior project manager that was undertaking the MEP scope? What did you do?
What is my role? I'm a highly paid babysitter. I make a lot of money babysitting subcontractors. Bottom line. I say that very, very facetiously. But that kind of dumbs it down. Basically, what our responsibility is as a senior project manager is to manage the different facets of whatever portion of the project we're handling. Smaller jobs, 960 was a very large project, right? Let's call it a $500 million tower in downtown LA. Big job, a lot of moving parts and pieces. When you're on a job of that magnitude, there's a lot of different senior project managers that handle different parts of the project. Now I'm involved with a smaller job, $45 to $50 million hotel renovation, and it'll just be me. It's going to be only be one senior project manager, so I will be in charge of the entire thing. So basically, your responsibility in that role is to put yourself in a position from an office perspective. You're not a field person. You're not out there directing work. You're in a position to bring vendors, trade partners, subcontractors on board through a subcontracting process and actual contracts that get executed. You commit costs associated to the project's budget to each one of those trades, and then you manage the process of getting all those trades to do their certain portions of construction to ultimately finish the project as a whole. So my responsibility is to orchestrate those things, anywhere from issuing contracts to running meetings to doing what the client wants us to get done, regardless of what it ends up being. Managing the day-to-day operations of cash flow and the money side of things. Managing scheduling, recognizing when things actually get done, and kind of how we're going to work to get to the end goal and the finish line. And, ultimately close the job and finish the project successfully, where as it relates to the paperwork side of things and the money side of things, and then put ourselves in a position to move on to the next opportunity, whether that be getting involved with pre-construction on a new job like we're currently doing, or getting involved with the pre-con department or the estimating department to estimate new jobs. It just depends kind of where things go after the project comes to an end. And a lot of times with these construction projects, there's an overlap because timing doesn't work perfectly to where you have a job that ends and a job that starts. It never works exactly like that. So there's this overlap, right? Where you're finishing one job, but this other job's going to start and you got to do all this other stuff. So then that's kind of where things get convoluted. And a lot of times you get a lot busier at those times too.
Right.
So hopefully that explains a little bit about what a senior project manager or a project director do in the industry.
Right. Does a senior project manager do you go on site and you make sure the work is done correctly? How does that whole, I guess you want to call it a punch, how does that work in the MEP world? Who's doing that type of, is it you? Is it somebody underneath you? Or
well, focusing on MEPs, yeah, it would be me. You rely heavily on your subcontractors and your trade partners because we hire them as experts. We're not the experts. Like I said earlier, I know a little bit about a lot of things. We hire subcontractors and trade partners as the experts in each of those items. For example, every construction project that you would ever run always has an electrical contractor on board. Well, that electrical contractor is the expert on the electrical systems for the project as a whole. We, as the GC, would never be the expert, but they are, right? We rely heavily on them, and we hire them for those reasons.
But where are the checkpoints? Because you have to deliver to the owner. So where's the checkpoint where you say this person, whoever it is, the subcontractor, has done a good job? I guess you are not doing that. The city comes and does their final inspections.
Yep.
You're just
There's an inspection process, right? Whether it be by the city or other agencies. If you're doing government work, it's the government, obviously. A lot of times the government will hire third-party agencies to inspect their work.
Right.
If you're doing healthcare work in the state of California, it's a completely separate governing body that inspects work. So those are the checkpoints, right? Those are the systems that are in place to make sure the work's being done correctly. And then ultimately on a construction project, you know this because you're the scheduler, you have intermediate milestones, and you have milestones within the project schedule. It's not just the beginning and the end. You develop a schedule and you develop a CPM and a baseline with intermediate milestones,
right?
So that the trade partners and the general contractor and the client can work towards those goals within the job itself. You don't ever build a construction schedule and you don't ever run a job with the only milestone being the end of the project.
Right. You have
because you'll never be able to track what your status is or where your progress is, right?
I guess what I'd like to know is if you know really deeply about something, do you get involved, and what is the distance that you keep with the subcontractors?
Okay.
You just say, okay, I know that, if you know something is wrong, and do you bring this up with the subs and push? Where do you stop pushing, or how does that work?
That's a good point. It's a good
work?
question. It all depends on the project, and it all depends on the trade partners that you have involved. You're never going to have a construction project where every single one of your subcontractors or your trade partners or your vendors are going to be perfect and everything's going to go great.
Right.
You're never going to have that. Every project is going to have their bad apples. And it's not necessarily a bad apple per se. Sometimes it could be. Sometimes they could be really terrible subcontractors and they can go bankrupt. They can go out of business. I mean, it could get bad.
Yeah.
But as somebody with experience in the industry, I know what the signs are to be able to see when things are starting to go south. That's my responsibility. That's my job to recognize these things and dive into them. And I mean, we can get into specifics as to what these tall tale signs are.
Yeah.
But I mean, a perfect example of one of them would be subcontractors aren't showing up all of a sudden, whereas you schedule work. The superintendents who are running the field work call these folks. They don't answer their phones. They don't show up. It happens pretty consistently. It happens a lot. That's a bad sign, right?
We're going to get into this aspect of how do you manage these very difficult, awkward situations, but I might as well bring it up. How do you deal with that when somebody doesn't call and you're kind of
I go to their house and I bang down their door.
Yeah.
No. I mean, I wish sometimes I could. I think we've talked about this before, but I mean, obviously the broader audience on this podcast, we're just going to go ahead and assume that they don't know, but there's a lot of things that are put into place as it relates to risk management. And that's the entire reason why we issue subcontracts and these vendors execute agreements,
right? That
they're basically I think you have said, I've told you before, Dish, and you've heard me say, it's like playing chess, right? These are the rules of playing chess, and you establish the rules in the subcontract and you play by those rules. Now, if you go and you play a game of chess,
we haven't talked about chess because I was really into chess when I was a grower, but go on.
Okay. I know I've had this conversation with people like Ali and
right.
Luana and Keisha, the younger kids. I say younger kids, they're not kids, but the younger project engineers at 960. You're not going to go into playing a game of chess with somebody and allow them just to openly break the rules. You're not going to start the game and just automatically start playing with your queen, right? It doesn't work like that. Well, a lot of times what will end up happening is these subcontractors and these vendors that come on board will do that. They'll come on the job site and they'll start moving their queen right away. And the problem is that a lot of times we allow them to do that. And when you're playing a game of chess, you're going to be like, what the hell? Like, that's not how this works. You don't move. You got to move your pawn first and put yourself in a position to then move your queen if you really wanted to. But usually you don't want to move your queen until you're really not doing well or depending on your strategy, right? So with that being said, the subcontract is put into place so that you can establish the rules and make sure that the trade partners are following those rules. And it's our responsibility to implement that.
Right.
Now, there's a fine line. You don't want to be that general contractor that is just hard off on the rules all the time. And I mean, you got to maintain a relationship. And that's where things get difficult, because sometimes you don't want to enforce all the rules because it makes things adversarial. But you still need to do what you need to do to get things done. So There's a balance there.
Okay.
Hopefully that answered the question, did?
Yeah, it did, actually. So how does one go about learning the MEP scope?
Oh, shoot.
What is the procedure? Is it years of being around and learning bit by bit? Any advice you can give on anybody trying to learn this scope? Because it is I feel like it, depending on, compared to the other scopes, it is a specialty type of scope. So how does one go about? Is it a special course you can take, or is it just
how can I answer this question? Yeah, of course you can read books and take special courses till the cows come home. And anybody can do that, right? You can read books and volumes, and you can study it up, and you can do everything you can to put yourself in a position to educate yourself on MEP systems, right? Anybody can do that.
Yeah.
But does that make you an expert? Not
Probably
really.
not.
No, right? At the end of the day, in my opinion, what makes somebody an expert at something is their experiences and their knowledge based off of the amount of years or the amount of time they've invested into doing those things. Yeah. Professional athletes aren't professional athletes. They don't just wake up and become a pro football player or a pro baseball player.
Right.
Like there is, most of these professional athletes have been putting time and effort into their sport since like the day they were born, or like maybe when they're like 2 or 3 years old. Right. They start throwing a baseball around or start throwing a football around. And at the age, let's just call it in their early 20s, when a lot of these professional athletes are at their prime and at their peak. I mean, that's 15, 20 years after they were born of time and effort that they put into these things. I've been in the industry now for 15 years. This May will be 15 years, officially. Full time, that is. I have another 3 years of like internships and then my schooling. But now that I'm at my 15th year mark, I look back and I'm definitely not an expert. I don't think I'll ever consider myself an expert. I won't, just because that's me as an individual. That's how I think. I don't ever think that I'll be an expert at anything. There's always opportunity to learn. Right. But I do know a lot about it, and I can speak very intelligently to a lot of the conversations, and I know enough to be dangerous, to the point to where if somebody's trying to pull the wool over my eyes, I can call it out very, very quickly. And it actually happens more often than not. And it's funny. I actually think it's really funny when that happens to me, because people like some bad subcontractors, because they're out there, or some bad vendors, even some bad owners, right, will try to take advantage of the situation, not knowing what you know. And I look at it as like a game where
we're gonna get into that, because I have a special question for
you. These folks will try to throw something out at you and bring conversation to the table, or bring topics to the table, and I'll just sit back and willingly let them talk and kind of blow smoke, knowing that they're a lot of times full of shit or just don't know what they're talking about. And then like I'll start talking, or I'll say something, and you look at the look on their face, and it's just like, oh shoot, this guy does know what he's talking about. And then it's just like, it's game on from that point. And I love it. Like that, I live for that. Like that is it's so fun to get in those situations. Now it's not, sometimes it's adversarial. A lot of people in this industry don't like adversarial conversations, or they shy away from that. Yeah. I love that stuff. Like I love hard conversations. I love being in situations. You're not fighting. I don't like fighting. I don't like yelling.
What's the difference? Where do you draw the line between a fight and what you're describing?
I like to think of it as debate, right? When you're debating with somebody, you're not fighting, but you're going at it, right? That's kind of what I look at it as.
Okay.
And it's
yeah, we're gonna get into the management and the dealing of the people section, but I want to just finish up on the technical things. So what do you think is the difference? How is the MEP package different from the other packages? Can you describe the differences?
Yeah. I mean, the MEP packages are usually very technical. They're usually a lot more involved. There's a lot more behind it. There's a lot more to buy. There's a lot more design to it. There's a lot more moving parts and pieces. But I'd say that's like 80% of the time. Okay. That's not a consistent thing. It depends on the project. It really does. If you're doing a construction project that's like a mass grade with a big box, like an Amazon warehouse, or a Costco warehouse or a Walmart warehouse. I mean, these are literally big boxes. They're built. They're all over the country now, especially the Amazon worlds. That type of construction is actually slowing down now because there's not a lot of space to be built on anymore, and Amazon has really perfected their logistics to build these big boxes. But a big box type project is literally a giant acreage of land where you're moving a lot of dirt to get in a position to build literally a big box, and it's all concrete.
Yeah.
And then it has a roof on it with a bunch of truss.
Right.
And that's it. And these things can run $200 million. They can be 2 million square feet. They're literally just a giant big box with hundreds of truck doors and a bunch of asphalt and concrete around it. If you look at a project like that, are the MEP systems intricate? 90% of the times, no.
Yeah.
Because it may have like 100 square feet of office space that has like some package heat pumps, which is fairly basic. So on a job like that, the MEP systems would be easy. Your more technical trades that you would buy or you would award would be concrete and grading and underground utilities, which I'm currently speaking the language, but for people who are listening to this who don't know construction, I'm speaking a foreign language.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, think of it high level to where every job that you do is different, and the most technical packages aren't always the MEPs, but they tend to be most of the time, if that makes sense.
Right. And if it's more technical, then wouldn't you expect there be more attention to it, more people involved? Because I feel like most of it is interiors or the concrete. I see more people there, but not really the MEP. Maybe I'm mistaken. You can correct me.
It depends on how the companies set the project team up. I won't use this podcast as an opportunity to give opinions. We'll try to just stick to facts.
We don't want to get too. We don't want to create a scenario where.
But at the end of the day, you want to try to set your project teams up the most effective and efficient ways, and it's the senior project manager or the director or the VP or the higher level individual's responsibility to work with the client and do that appropriately, if that makes sense.
Okay, but you would like more people involved in. I mean, I'm talking generally.
You want more people involved with the more technical
things
of a project.
Right.
If you have a million cubic yard cut fill grading package, which you probably don't even know what I'm talking about. But
no, you can explain that if you like.
That's a big deal. Like, that's basically you're moving tons and tons and hundreds of thousands of cubic yards of dirt.
Right, for grading. Yeah.
For grading operations. Yeah. Okay. That's a technical operation. You're going to want a lot of people involved with that. If you have hundreds of thousands of cubic yards of concrete that you're pouring, that's a pretty intricate operation. You're going to want a couple of people involved with that. And I just reference back to big boxes because you're relating your construction experience to the Beaudry Tower, which is the project that we were assigned to, or that I was assigned to, and you're currently assigned to.
Well, I was talking in general. I mean, generally, I've seen on other projects the MEP doesn't get as much love. Maybe I'm trying to clarify this.
It should.
That's the whole thing.
This is kind of an opinion, but I feel like it's fact as well. MEP systems and the MEP trades tend to not get a lot of love sometimes because there's a lot of project managers and senior project managers and even directors and vice presidents out there that work in the general contracting industry that don't know the language and they don't know much about MEP systems.
Why? Why is this?
Because
why it doesn't? I mean, without getting into.
Great question, and I love when people ask me that because it's not something that you see. It's not flashy. It's not tangible. Okay, in construction, just like I said earlier, people see a hammer and nails and wood, and it's like, oh yeah, I can play with that. I can see it. I can see it going up.
Right.
That's flashy. Okay, yeah. But MEP systems, you don't see.
You feel them.
You either feel them, or you know they're happening, or they're behind the scenes, they're behind the walls, they're covered up. But it's the organs and the brain and the heart of any building you're building.
Exactly.
So it's the most important, yet you can't see it. So a lot of times people don't care about it and don't put enough time and effort into it because it's not fun and flashy. Concrete, steel, digging dirt, cranes, all that stuff. A lot of the contractors like that stuff because you can see it, you can feel it, you can touch it. But once all that's done and you start doing MEP systems and you do commissioning and you do startup and you do testing and you start running cable and this is stuff that people don't understand, and it's not fun a lot of times. To me, it's fun. I like it. That's just because I'm technical. But a lot of people don't like it and don't think it's fun and flashy, so they just don't pay attention to it.
But there's a lot of money involved. They should be interested in it for the money, to make sure it's...
Not everybody's chasing money, buddy.
Okay. All right. Let's move on to more technical things. If you could describe what a single line diagram is for anyone that doesn't know. Generally, what is that used for?
Okay.
Yeah.
So we talked high level with MEP systems. Your question now is diving into a very specific part of MEPs, which is good. Okay.
Yeah.
So MEP stands for mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. Also roped within that is sprinkler systems for fire sprinklers. There's a lot of other facets, but a lot of times folks just say MEPS. Okay. Mechanical systems usually have wet and dry side mechanical. Plumbing is usually just the plumbing systems, and then electrical is electrical. But there can be low voltage, medium voltage, and high voltage electrical systems. So that's a whole nother conversation. We could have a podcast completely based on just understanding the electrical systems. But a little piece of that puzzle is single line diagrams. And in any project that you ever run, I take that back. In most projects you run, I mean, you can go build a house if you wanted to and not have a set of plans. You probably won't do it in Los Angeles County. You probably have to be out in the wilderness in, I don't know, Nevada or Alabama or something where like you don't have building inspectors that are up your ass. But if you're building a home or any sort of a structure in a city that has a governing building agency, you're gonna be required to have some sort of plans and specifications so that somebody can buy off that what you're building is safe. And then that has to be verified by the city agencies. Well, 99% of the time, one of the documents within that set of plans is what's called a single line drawing or a single line diagram. Like the basic document associated to electrical drawings and how you're going to build the electrical comes from the single line drawing. So an electrical engineer, those are the individuals who draw these plans for electrical systems, starts developing plans for a building. The first drawing that they do and the first document that they put together is a single line drawing. Mm-hmm. And the easiest way to explain it, which I think we talked about before when we sat down, is just think of it as a drawing similar to your brain and your spinal cord and all of your nervous system and in your body. It shows on a piece of paper where the electricity within the building comes from and how it gets distributed within the building. Right. And it shows loads, it shows panels, it shows routing. This is all information that it shows on a piece of paper so that you can visualize it on a high level. And that is what you would call a single line drawing.
Right. And these electrical systems, one of the most important thing is that you want to bring in the electricity from a high voltage to a low voltage, and we use transformers to do that. Can you talk more about that? The transformers, different types of transformers. I know that some of them are grounded, some of them are not. What is the difference between?
So now you're diving into specifics of certain aspects of the single line drawing. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, electrical current and electricity comes from usually a public utility. It comes from Southern California Edison, Department of Water and Power, wherever you end up living. A public utility agency usually provides to you your power. Right. The goal when you're building a building is that you're pulling the power from the grid off of your private property and bringing it onto your private property so that you can now power your building.
Yeah.
The power that comes from the utility agencies and from the grid is usually very, very high voltage. It is not, you can't just pull that power directly onto your private property and then plug in your cell phone. You'll kill yourself, okay? The piece of equipment that is utilized to reduce the voltage of this electricity that's coming from the grid is known as a transformer. So usually on larger scale commercial construction projects, the public utility agency will require your electrical engineer to design your electrical systems to allow for them to put their own transformer on your private property to step down the power that comes from their grid to be able to give you power at your building. So basically, the public utility agency has handcuffs on your electrical design, and it's kind of a pain in the butt. And I think you remember when we were dealing with that 960 and the DWP issues, like every construction project you ever run, the electrical utility agency ends up running your job or ends up being a critical path to your project because you obviously need power eventually, and they don't do anything quick. But to answer your question, these transformers are part of the electrical systems, and they step down power. So at your home, when you're building a home, usually the public utility agencies have transformers within their grid, and they don't put a transformer on your home property.
Yeah. And
the power that they give you into your home service panel or your electrical panel is usually 120 volt power. It usually comes in single phase. Sometimes it'll come in 3 phase. That's a whole other conversation. But the power it gets stepped down in a transformer within the grid. If you ever go drive around the city and you look up on the power poles, the white little buckets that are hanging on the power poles, those are step down transformers.
Right.
So those are utilized to step down the very, very high voltage that's on the utility poles through those white buckets, and then that power, after it goes through that white bucket, it comes down the pole and usually goes into the homes.
So we get 120, but I believe it's 480 that comes to the building. Is that right? Because
depends.
480 or 208.
Those are the major types. There's a bunch of different types of voltages. I mean, you're diving into specifics now, and
yeah, I
actually am not an expert at that.
I wanted to know what it is in the generators, the power plants, basically.
That's a good question. I actually don't know.
You don't know?
No.
Okay.
Remember, I'm not an expert.
Okay.
Thank you for thinking I know, though.
And of course we have the floor power distribution units. So these are units that get connected to other units, and they distribute power to the adjacent units. Do you know why they're designed the way they are in terms of I believe they service the floor on top and the bottom, so that distribution floor distributes to the top and the bottom.
Okay, I understand. So
why is it like that?
What you're referring to right now is it's a specific type of construction. think of it high level. Your single line document is going to show you how your electricity gets distributed from your building. When you're building a multi-story building, you can't just you have to distribute power a certain way. A lot of times, let's just say, for example, a tower in downtown LA, which is what you're a part of. You get, let's just call it 50 stories or 50 floors of units or whatever it may be, just 50 separate slices of your building that need power. Well, you're not going to send 120 volt power to the 50th floor. It won't ever get there. It'll die. It will disappear because it's not enough current and it's not enough amperage to go that far. But you need 120 volt power on the 50th floor to plug in your cell phone.
That's right.
Right? So the way that electrical engineers design these buildings is they will send, it's not technically high voltage, it's considered medium voltage still. They'll send medium voltage power at a higher voltage and a higher amperage up the building through different methods. You can use very thick cable with a lot of copper, or you can use what's called a bus duct, which is just basically a copper bar that sends electricity, very high voltage electricity all the way up, and it sends it. So basically, think of it like a water hose, where if you had a garden hose and you wanted to get water from the spigot a mile away, do you think the water will get there? No. It'll stop eventually. And the hose will probably end up filling up, but you won't have any sort of pressure a mile away. If it'll just be like a trickle, if that. I don't even know. I've never tried it. But we all know, common sense tells you that that's not going to work. Electricity is the same way, where when you travel a certain distance, your voltage dies out. So you have to, if you're traveling a certain distance, you have to send, if you're traveling a far distance, you have to send a lot of voltage. And then at the certain distance point, you have to use a step down transformer at that point to get it into the lower voltage. So that, once again, I use a cell phone because everybody has one. So you can plug in your cell phone. Make sense?
Right.
So that's where these distribution floors you speak of, those are where those get implemented. So you have power that will go to a certain area at a high voltage, and then it'll distribute itself after it goes through a step-down transformer to lower voltages.
Right. Makes sense. Do you want to talk a little bit about automatic transfer switches for emergency cases, what they are, how they work?
Yes. So in the electrical world, bigger commercial buildings will be designed with standard normal electrical power, and then there will be emergency electrical power. Mm-hmm. The emergency electrical power doesn't come from the grid. It comes from backup generators usually, or sometimes there's battery banks that are used, but most buildings use generators. Depending on the size of your building, sometimes smaller commercial buildings don't require emergency power, or it may just not be designed with having emergency power. Every commercial building has some sort of emergency function though. So if a fire life safety incident takes place, you would be able to egress out of the building without having electricity. But with that being said, if your building is designed with having an actual emergency power system with a generator backup, an automatic transfer switch, which is what an ATS is, essentially activates that function of the electrical system. Think of it as a valve in your heart, or just a valve in general, and think of it like a Y, where electricity will be flowing one way in a normal instance through one of the Ys, the left side of the Y. So here's your electrical flowing normally from the grid, okay?
Right.
Power goes down for whatever reason. Let's just say there's an emergency and the grid goes down and this electricity stops flowing. Mm-hmm. Okay? The automatic transfer switch sits at the Y point. And once this side of the Y stops flowing, it will automatically transfer to the opposite side of the Y. And electricity will start flowing through that side, but it won't be coming from the grid at that point. It'll be coming from where? I just said it. Come on, that's a question for you, Dish.
From backup generators.
That's correct.
Right.
Yes. So you're basically dividing the electrical systems. Normal power, automatic transfer switch. This dies, boom, switches over to the generator side.
Right.
And that happens automatically. So with the intent that the systems go back, the life safety systems go back up in the event there's an emergency. Backup generators usually don't power absolutely everything. So in a building, the backup generators will usually only power life safety functions. So it would be egress lighting, smoke control systems. In a hospital setting, backup generators will operate like certain functions of electrical power systems in like the operating rooms.
Mm-hmm. Right.
In the event, I mean, this is real life safety shit.
Safety, yeah.
In the event that there's a natural disaster and somebody's getting operated on, you need to be able to still keep them alive. So that's. Now, I built hospitals for 10 years of my career, so I know entirely too much about that stuff. But I venture to say that that's actually what gave me much of my experience in knowing the MEP systems very well, because medical facilities and hospitals have very, very intricate MEP systems.
Right, they need to because of the issue.
Now we can sit here and have a whole nother podcast on that if you want. But
okay, we'll move on to bonding. I want to talk about a little bit on bonding.
Oh, you're bouncing everywhere.
Yeah, just a little bit on everything.
Dish picked all his topics that I taught him.
Well, I know those topics because he told me. I guess. Yeah. I want to talk about bonding.
Okay, so we're done with MEPs.
Would you like to talk about the hospitals?
Nah, that's it. We'll do another podcast on that.
Okay, we'll pick some other topics and talk about.
Okay.
On the next podcast.
So we're moving on from electrical systems and MEP systems. Now we're going to talk about bonding.
Yeah, we're going to switch it up to bonding.
So let's ask me some questions. What do you want to know about bonding?
What is bonding? How is it different from insurance? What type of bonding there is? How has bonding changed over the past 10 to 20 years?
In my career?
In the construction industry, yeah.
Just within the 15 years that I've been here?
Well, let's talk about what bonding is
okay,
first.
Let's go high level. Insurance and bonding, okay? They're not the same thing, okay? Yep. So for everybody on this podcast that thinks that insurance and bonding are the same thing, they're not. Insurance is insurance. I mean, you every normal person in this world has to carry some sort of insurance, whether it be health insurance, car insurance, etc. It's something that we pay for that ultimately covers us and takes care of us financially in the event that something comes up or shit hits the fan, for lack of a better term. Right?
Right.
The easiest way to explain this, which most people deal with, is car insurance. You pay a certain amount of money on a monthly basis to drive your car in the event that you have an issue, whether it be a wreck, someone gets injured, etc. God forbid somebody passes away. Insurances kick in and they take care of those things. Obviously, after paying a premium.
Yes.
Which is a bit unfortunate. We're not going to talk. I mean, insurance. In my opinion, insurance companies are crooked as hell. But that's a whole nother conversation. So in the construction industry, our business is extremely, extremely risky. I don't need to explain that, but what we do is risky, very dangerous. There's a lot of things that we get into on a daily basis that affect people's lives and are could be deadly, right? So we carry insurances to cover those things, whether it be auto insurance coverage or general liability insurance or blanket umbrella coverages. There's different type of insurances that are carried with our trade partners and our subcontractors, with the client, ourselves. There's many multiple different types of policies that everybody carries, which the rules are set. The rules of chess are set in the subcontract. And part of that subcontract are the rules for what you need to have for insurances. Additional to that, there's another level of coverage and there's another level of protection that's carried from a financial perspective in the industry, and that's bonding. Okay. So basically the way to explain bonding is that is a backing that a bank will pay you, or that you'll pay to a bank or a surety company, that in the event something happens to that company financially and they can't support your construction project anymore.
A subcontractor can't.
Yeah, usually a vendor or some sort of subcontractor or a supplier. We, whether either the general contractor or the client, will require a bond to be actually procured. Yeah, it's an actual piece of paper that's stamped and sealed that states, in the event that Dish Construction doesn't perform their work and doesn't pay their bills, we can request and demand that the bonding agency or the bank steps in and covers those costs so that the construction project can continue to be built.
Mm-hmm.
That is something that is paid for. So when you go as a vendor, as if you're Dish Construction and somebody wants to hire you as a subcontractor, and they say, well, I can't hire you unless you obtain a payment and performance bond or a bid bond or whatever type of bond. There's different types of bonds. Then you'll have to go buy that and you'll have to pay for that to have that piece of paper that says, okay, if anything ever happens to me, we're covered. It's not cheap. Usually it can range from a couple of $100 to a couple of $100,000. But a lot of times that just ends up being a cost of the project, though. So if a general contractor is going to hire you, Dish Construction, and they tell you that you need to obtain a payment or performance bond, the price that you give them to do that work is just going to go up because you're going to include the cost for that payment and performance bond in the cost that you're giving the client.
Basically a markup.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what payment and performance bonds are.
How has it changed over the past 10 years, 20 years? Has it seen anything given the housing bubble burst? There was a lot of issues with the construction industry.
That changed. That's exactly what I was going to allude to. Before 2008, things were a lot different. Bonding wasn't very common. It was, I would traditionally only bond subcontractors or vendors that have subcontractors that are in like $1 million and more.
Mm-hmm.
So like if we were gonna execute a subcontract that was worth $2 million, then 99.9% of the time we would bond you, so that we have that level of protection to the client.
Right.
After 2008 and nowadays, most vendors and subcontractors are bonded at $100,000. So if I was going to award you a contract and it was worth $100,000, I would ask for a bond.
So 100,000 is the limit.
That's usually the limit now. Sometimes a lot of companies require it no matter what. So I can award you a subcontract for $10,000 and they'll still require you to procure a payment or performance bond, which could cost like $5,000. So it doesn't make sense, but a lot of companies require it. But it doesn't cost anybody any money except for the client or the people building the job, because all it does is increase the cost of the subcontractor work.
Right, exactly.
Hopefully that answered the question.
Oh, it did. We can all go into the different types, but I think I'm going to leave it at that. Maybe we can do it in another podcast, go over if I feel that that's a topic we want to get into. So I want to get into how you started in construction, what motivated you to enter the field, and did you have any mentors?
You know, a lot of times people who get into the construction industry will tell you, well, I got into construction because my dad or my family or my uncle or somebody associated to that individual was part of construction before they got into it. That's not how it was for me, actually. There's nobody in my family that did construction. The thing that got me into construction was basically the fact that when I was a kid, I was always hands-on. I was very intricate. I like to build things. I like to play with things. I like to tinker with things. So I knew that I kind of always wanted to get into something associated to that. I was fortunate enough that my parents sent me to a private technical high school where I actually learned construction in high school. Mm-hmm. We had it was called a trade, where it was a trade
school basically, yeah.
But it was also a regular school and my trade was construction, and I learned residential construction when I went to high school for 4 years. I took probably 20 plus courses. Every semester had 2 construction courses.
Wow.
That I learned construction. I learned every facet of it. I learned how to draft. I learned how to engineer. I learned electrical, plumbing, framing. I learned finishes. I learned how to do roofing. I learned how to do wood frame houses. I learned a little bit about metal stud construction. I learned pretty much every portion of residential construction. We touched it. Now, we weren't experts on it, but if I wanted to,
which school was it? If you don't
it was
mind
called
asking.
Don Bosco Technical Institute. It was here in
Bosco.
Southern California, in the city of Rosemead.
Okay.
One of our colleagues, James, who actually he went to the same high school as well, and then my roommate went to the same high school as me. So I still have a couple of close buddies. But if I really wanted to, I can build my own home right now. I have that capability.
Up to code, everything. You would know.
I don't know all the codes. I'm not. I can do it to the point to where it probably wouldn't be to code, but it wouldn't fall down, and it would be good. I couldn't do it.
You would trust it, so you would live in it.
Absolutely.
Even though it's not code, but you would.
Absolutely.
Still, okay.
It would probably be 70 to 80% up to code.
Okay.
I would probably have to have somebody help me that knows all of the current codes and does it professionally.
Right.
But most of the heavy lifting I can do myself.
This is a 1-2 floor, 1 or 2 floor.
I can do a 2-story house. Yeah.
You can do a 2-story.
I know how to frame stairs. I know how to do common rafters. I know how to do floor joists, see a roof joist. I know how to frame roof structures. Yeah. I know how to do plumbing systems, electrical systems.
Wow.
I've done it.
Did you have any mentors? Did you have anybody that you kind of looked up to? Anybody that really guided you throughout that process? No one's.
Not a lot of people. I'd like to say most people in this world can say this, but unfortunately, not everybody can. But my parents, they sacrificed everything that they could for me to give me what I wanted. They spent a lot of money to send me that at high school. A lot of money. It wasn't a public school.
This was a private school. Okay.
It was private.
Wow.
And not cheap.
Wow.
So they spent a lot of money to send me to that high school, which changed my perspective and actually ultimately gave me the motivation to get into construction.
Okay.
Other than that, I look back to a lot of my high school professors who taught me, and I remember them all. I don't keep in contact with any of them, but I remember them all, which, they obviously made an impact on me.
Yeah.
I look to a couple of professors from college.
Mm-hmm.
who had an impact on me. Not all of them, that's for sure. Some of them were assholes, but a large majority of them were pretty cool. And then once I got into my professional career, there's a couple of people that I look up to or look back towards that helped me become who I am,
Okay.
and mentored me and taught me what I know. But I can't really say that there's like one person. Ultimately, I would say it's my parents.
Your parents.
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds fair. Is construction a symphony or a warfare?
That's an interesting question, Dish. I would say a combination of both. No, I take that back. I don't want. No, that's not my answer. It depends on the project.
It depends on the project.
It really does. It does.
Can you elaborate?
I've been on construction projects that are symphonies, and everybody's making money. The client's happy. You're on schedule. I take that back. I've never been on a construction project where you're on schedule. Never.
I mean, that's expected.
But I think
your attitude towards it, I guess, is how do you see it in terms of when you get up in the morning?
Well,
you
to
wanna
answer
come
the
to work.
let's focus on answering that question because I liked that question.
Yeah.
It depends on the job, right? So, like I said, if symphony situation from what I think you're saying here is like everything's good, you know.
Yeah. Well, no. I mean, you try to work with people. You try to be in symphony with people.
Yeah, I consider that a good situation. Yeah, I've been on those jobs, and like I said, it's all depending on the job.
People help each other. They care about each other.
People
they try
are
to
getting
make sure
along.
that exactly.
You walk into your construction job site trailer or the office in the morning, and everybody's getting along with each other. You go to lunch with each other. You want to go have beers after work with each other. Everybody's like, it's good. It's good.
What percentage would you say it's like that?
Shit. Probably 30% of the time.
30%.
It's not.
That's not that
it's
bad.
not. It definitely should be more often.
Yeah.
But it's not. Warfare. I've been on jobs where people are legitimately fist fighting with each other, and it's not fun. It's very.
Wow.
You can cut the tension with a butter knife. You're fighting with your own team. People are talking behind each other's backs. It's. Look, I'm not a fan of that stuff. I think it's wasted energy. It doesn't have to be construction. It's just work in general. Like we said earlier, like we work to live. We don't live to work. So like, why go to work and make it drama? Why go to work and have a bunch of bullshit to deal with? I try to stay away from that. I really do. But that's me personally. I try to.
So 30% symphony, 70% warfare. That would be.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll leave it at that.
All right. How do you make challenging management decisions? How do you, if you really have a tough meeting, there's a lot of complicated things happening. How do you get ready for that management decision? It's complicated, gives you a lot of worries. What are your steps to dealing with it?
I try to seek advice. I try to talk to people who've done it before. Try to get the stories from multiple angles to try to make the best decision for something. Not everybody's going to be happy with every decision that you make, unfortunately, but that's business.
Mm-hmm.
You can't take business personal. You just got to kind of roll with the punches. If you have to fire somebody, usually it's done within reason. You don't just fire somebody just because. So you take your steps. If you have to give the client bad news, you usually do it with tact. You're honest with them. It's a lot easier to have these conversations with people if you've built a relationship with them.
Right.
If you don't have a relationship with somebody and you're like going at it blindly, then having a tough conversation with them is going to be difficult. But if you know somebody and you know a little bit about somebody and you can have a casual conversation with them, you can walk into them and say, hey, I unfortunately have some bad news and I'd like to talk to you about it. And it's a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
You can't take it personal though. Like, there's been instances where bad decisions or bad news has been shared, and then people take it personal. They get all worked up. They cry. They get angry. They throw things. It's not worth it. It's work. That's the way you got to look at it.
How do you prepare for a tough, high-risk meeting?
Make sure you get your ducks in a row.
You just prepare.
Yeah.
Okay.
Me personally, I mean, some people can do it on a whim, do it off a cuff, on a fly, and they're good at it. And I actually envy those people. I'm not that way. I have to, in any meeting I go into, I have to mentally prepare myself and then prepare.
Do you meditate?
No, I
do
just
you have
think.
any sort of thing? You
just think. Just make sure
Take walks.
I can't sit still if my life depended on it. I mean, I'm doing. You're doing good right now, Dish. But like, just in general, I gotta walk around in circles. You know that. But just being prepared. That's I was actually a scout. I was a scout my entire life.
Oh, really? Okay. I was a scout too.
I am an Eagle Scout, as a matter of fact. And one of the Boy Scout mottos is to be prepared. Like, that's literally that is their motto.
Yeah, that's right.
So I don't really think about it. Like, I don't think like, okay, I don't wake up every morning and say, oh, I'm a Boy Scout, so I got to be prepared. It's just like ingrained into my head. It really is. Where like every time I do something, even in my personal life, I prepare for it.
Right.
Whether it be going on a long drive, I always make sure my tires are good, and I have like a bag in my car if for something were to go wrong. Or I like outdoor stuff, so like going camping, I'm always prepared. I always have everything that I need. I'm always that guy when I go camping that has everything.
Everything prepared.
And people are like, "Oh man, you got everything." And it's just like, well, that's just how I think. It's just like, I don't want to not be prepared for certain things.
Mm-hmm.
I go into that in my professional career as well. And if for whatever reason you get into a situation to where you're in a public setting or in a meeting and you get backed into a corner, it's always the best thing you can do is just be honest. Say, hey, you know what? I'm not prepared for that, or I can't answer that question, but let me take a note, and I promise you I'll get back to you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. And 99.9% of the time, you'll be okay.
Okay. As a manager, how do you decide to delegate tasks to other people versus doing it yourself? Do you how do you make that decision? Is it
as you work your way up the ranks?
Yep.
I mean, let's go high level. Let's just hypothetically speak here. Everybody on this podcast knows who Elon Musk is.
Yeah.
Everybody on this podcast not everybody. Most people on this podcast will probably know who Mark Cuban is.
Right.
Okay, these are all very, very professional people. Jeff Bezos. I mean, these are billionaires. Okay.
Right.
Take money out of it. They're still individuals. Okay. And they obviously run businesses and do things professionally. Mm-hmm. With that being said, once you start working your way up through the ranks, you have to learn how to delegate. If you don't delegate and delegate efficiently and effectively, then you won't ever work your way up. You won't ever get to that point to where you have a team, because you're always just going to be doing the things yourself. The higher up you go, the less day-to-day work you should be doing, and the more managing and orchestrating that you should be doing.
Right.
Personally, right now in my career, I'm kind of in a little bit of a rut. And I've put a lot of thought into it. Once again, 15 years into this, I'm starting a new construction project, but I'm doing everything and I don't have a team, and it's going to happen probably for the next 6 months. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm getting paid good money. I'm fairly close to home, which is nice, for my new project, that is. But did I do something wrong as it relates to the progression of my career to where I'm back to doing everything myself and I don't have a team and I'm not delegating? I don't know.
Yeah, I guess my question wasn't whether you want to. How do you decide on delegating? How do you decide on delegating something versus doing it yourself? Because you can't really delegate something to somebody who doesn't know the work or is going to screw up and is going to look bad on you. So how do you make that decision? You look at their profile, you talk to them, because you can't just give it to anybody, right? And if they're not up to it, what do? You go.
Do you like sports, Dish?
I like soccer.
Okay. So who's the best soccer player in the world?
Ronaldo, probably, or Messi.
Okay.
I mean,
so Messi or Ronaldo, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's just say, how many people are on a soccer team? How many players are on a soccer team?
10, well, 11.
Okay. So
including-
10 players plus a goalie, right? Yeah. Okay. So when you have a soccer team that has Ronaldo, okay, are all the other 9 players Ronaldos?
No.
Obviously not, right? But who won the World Cup this year? I don't remember.
You don't remember?
Who was it?
Argentina.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Messi, right? He was on that team.
Yeah.
He's one of the number 1 soccer players in the world.
Right.
Okay. Well, Argentina's team doesn't have all Messi's.
Yeah.
Okay. But they obviously won the World Cup. So they were able to do something right. As a manager, it's my responsibility to figure out how to win the World Cup with not all Messi's. So when I have a team, there's going to be A players, there's going to be B players, there's going to be C players, and there's going to be D and F players. But it's my responsibility to figure out how to get to the end goal with all of those people and resources. Mm-hmm. So to answer your question, I'm not going to delegate a task to a C player that I know they can't handle. I'd have to delegate that task to an A player. And that comes with experience. You're not going to know that right off the bat. And not everybody in this world is born with leadership qualities.
Right.
So sometimes you just deal with it overall. Mm-hmm. It just depends.
What is the craziest thing you've seen on a job? I know you've said that you've seen people fighting. What is the craziest thing you've seen?
A death.
You have seen a death
Yes.
on a job site?
Yes.
Like physically, with your own eyes?
There was a dead body. Yes.
Okay. You've seen a death.
I didn't see the actual death.
Okay. Well.
But yeah, and that's in this conversation we've talked about risk and why we have insurances. Thankfully, at least, and there's no thankful behind it because it's still a death. But that particular employee wasn't a direct employee to my company and or my construction project. They were actually one of the facilities employees. But it was 10 feet away from where I was standing, and it happened. And it moves you. It really does. I'll never forget basically the way that I thought about it was you have an individual who came to work that day, literally to just make money to feed their family or feed themselves, and they died, and they're not ever going to be able to come back. Like, that feeling sucks. So to answer your question, yeah, that's the worst. And everybody in the construction industry will tell you that if they've dealt with that, it's that they'll probably agree that that's the worst situation you can be in. And it sucks. And everybody's like on a daily basis, not always a daily basis, but pretty occasionally with what we do, people will say, "Oh, this is a terrible job. Oh man, things suck. Oh, I hate this place." And a lot of times that comes from younger, less experienced people who think it's the end of the world.
Yeah.
And I look at them and I say, it's not really that bad. It really isn't. Like, have you ever been on a construction project where somebody died? Oh, no. Okay. Well, I have, and it sucks. That is the worst. So I don't wish that upon you, but take that understanding and take that to know that that's bad, and you don't want to ever get to that point.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why in the construction industry we have so many safety protocols and insurances and all these things in place. And it's our responsibility to live that culture, even from the very top to the very bottom. Every time I walk a construction project, which is now in my career, it's not as often as it should be, I take time to recognize the safety items. And it's as little as if I see something, I pick it up, or if I see something that's unsafe, I'll tell the guys. And you just have to be aware of it. You have to be cognizant. It's a culture.
Right. Yeah. Communication is key, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Moving from a terrible tragedy to the future. I know that you've had a startup. It did not pan out. What was your experience? What did you learn from it?
It's funny that you call it a startup. I look at a startup as, I don't look at it as a startup.
Okay, company.
I tried starting my own business.
Right.
I look at a startup as like
technology.
Something that you're doing that's never been done before.
Right.
Like the 0 to 1 deal, right? Like
right. We're gonna talk about that.
Right?
Yeah.
Like that's not. I tried starting a construction company. There's millions of construction companies out there.
Exactly.
Especially with the ones I tried starting a residential construction company. There's every Tom, Dick, and Harry out there has a residential construction company.
Right.
Joe's Construction, Dish Construction, right? You can do it.
Yeah.
What didn't work out for me was that I realized that the amount of success that I have personally within my career with what I currently do was never going to get to the point to where I am with what I was doing. It would have gotten to that point, but it was going to take a very long time. So I pretty much realized that I started too late, or that I think I started too late to go down the path of doing what I was planning on doing. If I would have done that in my early 20s, then maybe it would have panned out a bit differently. But I started it in my mid to late 30s, which means 10, 15 years down the road, okay, things are situated and I'm moving and I'm making good money, but I'm in my mid to late 50s. Like, it just wasn't going to work out for me the way I wanted it to.
Okay.
I'm in my late 30s now, making good money, doing podcasts. Whereas on a Saturday, when I was doing that, I would be loading my truck with material at Home Depot, swinging a hammer myself because my guys that I wanted to hire didn't show up because the client that I was working for is pissed off at me because their job's not done yet. That's where I was at. And it was just, I wasn't utilizing the education that I got and my experiences to the level that I feel I needed to. I'll never forget, I have a close buddy. His name's Greg. He kind of took the hard knock path outside of high school. He's kind of just always wanted to learn the hard way. He's not an office guy. He's a field guy. He's a mechanic. He's a little rough around the edges, but he's a close friend of mine. And I was hiring him to help me out when I was doing construction on my own, just paying him cash when I could. And he would always tell me, he's like, "Why are you doing this, man? This isn't for you. Like, you're a suit. You're an office guy. Like, you need to get out of this. Like, this ain't your gig."
You know, I've only seen you wear a suit once. I haven't seen, and actually, a lot of people don't wear suits.
Well, when I say suit, like that's just like an office guy. That's
right, okay.
Yeah. But that's kind of like my buddy threw me over the ledge too. He's like, okay, yeah, maybe I better get back to what I'm good at doing, like managing teams, running big construction projects. That's what I know I'm good at.
Would it be safe to say you found, or it wasn't your passion? I guess it was not. Was it not your passion, I guess, to run a company? Because it's not for everybody. Running a company is very difficult.
No, it's not my passion.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
I would say, I mentioned earlier that I'm kind of in a rut. Like, I feel like, and when I say I'm in a rut, like, I'm happy, but like I feel like I want to try to put myself in a position personally to where I don't really want to have to answer to a corporation eventually. I really don't. I'd love to be able to put myself in a position to where I can be financially stable and not have to wake up to an alarm clock every morning because I have to be at a meeting at Monday through Friday at 6:30 in the morning.
Yes.
I would legitimately, that's my goal in life. Now, does that mean I'm making the same amount of money I'm making now? Maybe not. But to be able to just wake up in the morning naturally and not have to rush to a meeting in downtown LA, which is what I did for the last year, and you do it too.
Yeah.
I think I would be really happy if I were able to do that.
Okay. Just having a little bit of freedom.
And you never have complete freedom, right? It's always you got to work, and I don't mind working hard, but like I want to be at that level, and I don't want to have to answer to a corporation. So that's kind of that's a two-headed monster there. Where like right now, I get paid by a corporation so that they can fire me anytime. Two, there's always this level of like uncertainty with certain things or what this person's thinking or what that person's thinking. It's like sometimes that gets old and I don't want to deal with that anymore.
Okay.
And I hope to get to that point by getting a strong position with real estate. Okay. Which is possible, and hopefully in the next 10 years things will change and I get to that.
Delve into real estate. Okay.
Absolutely.
So we've read a book.
Not done with it.
You're
yet.
almost done. Not done with it. Peter Thiel's. Well, it's actually lectures, and Blake Masters took. He was a student at the class. He took it and he made it a book out of it. But you haven't finished it yet, so I don't want to spoil too much. But I mean that book really had a huge impact on me. About building the future. Actually, it's one of the reasons why I got into construction. I was in the biotech industry, and that didn't work out too well. So I was like, well, what else can I do with the rest of my life? What is something that really hasn't seen a lot of innovation, that really needs the innovation? And I thought construction is the next thing I can focus on, with the cost, how slow things are done. You know, I thought that was something else. What so far that you've dabbled into it, what is your take on it? What do you think? Is he crazy? He is a contrarian, so he says things that are not very popular.
So I recently told one of my buddies, and I think we were talking about this earlier, about me reading that book. And the buddy that I told is actually very, very educated. He's read hundreds, if not thousands of books. He's a big time reader.
Okay.
He's got a couple of master's degree. The guy's super smart. We went to college together. Undergrad. He's got many other college experiences at this point in his life, but he's a really close friend of mine. And I told him I was reading that book, and he's like, I told him about it, and he's like, I wouldn't read it if someone paid me. But he has a very different way of thinking, and now that we're talking about it, and now that I look back to the read itself, at least from what I have gone, I mean, I'm about 75% done with the book. I could see where his thoughts are. It's very upfront. It's very opinionated.
Yep.
But it makes you think about certain things, that's for sure. The one thing that's really standing out to me right now is the whole PayPal mafia thing and kind of how they ran their business and what the theory was behind it. I mean, these are very, very successful people that have done it. But it's from a startup perspective. Once again, these are all theories of starting companies for things that haven't even been thought of.
Exactly.
I like to think that I'm decently smart, but I don't know if I'm that smart. Like I don't think like that. I think very practically. I tend to be a little bit more reserved. I'm more secure. I like to take risks, but I don't take a lot of risks. I like to be prepared, right?
Yeah.
I feel like the theory and the thinking that's outlined in that book isn't that way of thinking. It's like more of a way of thinking of, fuck it, let's do it and see what happens. Which is great because you can become a billionaire if it hits, right? I mean, the PayPal guys obviously thought of something, and here we are.
Yeah.
I don't personally think that I would ever get to that level, to be able to go from 0 to 1. But I do think that just based off of reading the book and understanding the principles behind it, that I could probably be at like a 0.75 right now.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that the book is talking about is how little innovation we've seen. They call it in the world of atoms, because we have the world of atoms, which is the physical world we're building, construction, etc. And there's the world of bits, which is the zeros and ones and software. And one of the things that he's making an argument on is that the world of atoms really hasn't seen a lot of innovation because of the regulations, increased regulations. Just it's become costly. There not a lot of people are working on it because it costs a lot of money to get started.
Yeah.
So what do you think of that? What do you think construction has become costly over time?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Right. It's. Do you see any type of innovation?
Unfortunately, what's driving construction costs up and what's changing the construction industry is our lawyers.
Yeah.
And the easiest way to explain this, at least from my perspective, in the 15 years that I've been doing it, and I've said that a few times already in this conversation, but it's kind of a milestone in my career personally, right? It's like, here I am, 15 years into my industry. Where am I at and where am I going?
Yeah.
I see myself with another 15 years. I'm kind of at like that halfway mark, right?
Right.
So what can I do in the next 15 years to project myself from the good status to the great status? Like, that's where I want to be, whether it be in construction or real estate or whatever it may be. I got some lofty goals in the next 15 years, which I can definitely attain. It's just going to take some work. Mm-hmm. But to answer the question, and sorry for going off on a tangent there, I feel like the construction industry it's pretty much 100% driven now by the lawyers and legalities and risk and everybody covering their ass. It's a little bit unfortunate. It really is. When I started in the industry, there still was that handshake mentality. There still was there wasn't a lot of it, but there was still like some trust factor, and there was still some backing to what people would say and what people would do. People would do what they say they're going to do. Nowadays, subcontracts, if you printed a subcontract, it would be literally 6 inches tall, mm-hmm. because there's so much documentation in it. Back when I started in construction, the subcontract was probably half an inch thick. Now, if you printed it, and not nobody prints them nowadays, but if you actually hit print on it, it would probably be 5 inches tall.
I should have asked you this before, because I know I've read those spec documents and other legal documents, and they are quite, well, to say it bluntly, they are quite boring. How do you read them? How do you even?
I try not to fall asleep, Dish.
No, but seriously, like how you do take a senior role, so how do you just read them? Just
it's part of the job. You just
part
read
of the job,
it.
and
read it like
you organize it using a OneNote or write it down.
Well,
you summarize it.
Subcontracts in the industry are very similar. So no matter what company you work with, no matter what subcontract you issue, most of them are pretty outlined the same way. Mm-hmm. So you know what to look for.
Right.
In having the experience, like I know where to go to find the information I need.
Right.
I don't read it blindly.
Exactly.
If you went and read it, you would not know what you're doing. But then, like, you know how to navigate P6 probably with your eyes closed. Okay. Well, I can't.
Right.
So that's your expertise, and then this is what I know what I'm doing.
So you know that the contracts are different types, so it's
same thing with owner contracts. Every owner contract's pretty much the same. They got the same sections. There's certain things that you look for.
Okay. Yeah, we did do a little bit of tangent, but I want to conclude the construction aspects of things with the future, which is, I believe, is prefab.
Yeah. You really have brought that up, and we've talked about that.
We've talked about it many times. So is prefab scalable? And if you were offered a role in a prefab startup, how would you be able to apply your knowledge to that company's success?
Prefab is definitely scalable. I feel like you are late to the game. because you don't even know the half of what's out there as it relates to prefab. I mean, I'm sure you've done your research, and obviously you're a smart dude, so you know. But I probably know a hell of a lot more about it than you do, just because of my experiences.
That's why I'm doing this podcast. So
I mean, there's companies out there now that prefab rooms, like they can do like a whole living quarter, or like, say for instance, one of the apartments at the Beaudry Tower. They've put themselves in positions to where they can fab that in like 4 pieces, and it gets built in a warehouse somewhere, comes out on a truck and just gets lifted and put into place.
Yeah.
And you put a couple of screws and you make a couple of connections and it's done. Like, that's prefab in my career has gone from 0 to 60 very quickly. And a lot of it is it's just based off of technology, right? When I started in construction, AutoCAD was there, like the virtual construction side of things was not primitive, but it was just getting kind of off the ground. Now you can model things in like a 10D world. I mean, I know it's probably not 10D, but like there's so many facets to building construction. Like, you can build something in a computer and hit print, put out a set of production drawings, and have people build something based off of that set in a warehouse, and know that it'll fit perfectly within a structure that you're building off-site, just because there's so much technology behind it.
Why hasn't it taken off? I guess that's one of my questions. I guess, why is it most of construction is not prefab? I guess, is it because it's too custom made of a job, so they don't do the prefab?
This is kind of an opinion. You're asking me as though I'm an expert on it. I'm definitely not an expert on this. Like,
no, I'm not asking for as just your opinion on these things.
An opinion. I think it's because it hasn't caught on with clients. A lot of construction projects are funded by banks and driven by lawyers. And if it's not private money, then there's a lot of convincing that needs to be done to spend all this money extra to save time on production on the back end. I've worked with clients, however, that are private clients that have all of their own money, and prefab works, and we've been able to apply it. But it's like, you have to convince these owners and these clients that it's effective and efficient and it works. But when you have a bank or other equity partners involved, which a lot of times you do, they don't see it and they don't care. They just know the traditional way, and they know the traditional way works. It's extremely inefficient and ineffective, but they know it works, so that's what they lean on.
Wouldn't it make them more money if things were done faster? Wouldn't they be excited?
But you have to sell it to these people.
There's no sale. I guess the issue is like nobody really sits down and
like
this.
You have to sell it to these people, and you have to take the time to be able to do that, but nobody wants to take those steps. For example, if you went into a new construction project like I am right now, where there's a ton of opportunity for prefab, and we can do a bunch of different things, but the people that are driving the construction project right now are equity partners. That's what they call them. They're people who work for Morgan Stanley and the banks that are like literally driving the project. They are worried about the dollars, and because of XYZ, we're redesigning things, and we're super inefficient about things because they're the bottom line, the dollar.
Yeah.
If I walked into any one of these meetings and I tried to explain to them that you can save a bunch of money by doing prefab, they'd probably listen to me, but then when I walked out of the meeting, they'd have to make a decision to do that. But do they want to take that risk? Not with their money. No.
So basically, we need like a company that, I know there's a bunch of prefab companies that are kind of becoming huge, S2As and the Boxables and other companies. I guess
You need the
time.
private sector and the private money to continue to invest in it, so that when you're going out into the public sector or when you're dealing with other people's money, they see that it's more efficient and effective than the traditional ways of doing construction. And once again, these are all opinions, but that's the way that I see it. Prefab MEP systems are huge out there. I mean, you can prefab an entire rack and entire rooms and just go plug and play. And it can be done. And it actually is done more often than not. But you just got to get the right people in the room to do it.
Mm-hmm. So prefab, the advantages would be the schedule as well as the build quality, because if you're not building one or two, you're building multiple, you're going to get...
You also have to have the right commercial general contractor to be involved with something like that. You can't hire a trunk slamming mom and pop company to do a project prefab because they won't know what they're talking about. You got to hire a company who knows what they're talking about. To be quite honest with you, like, at least down in Southern California, from the year that I've been here, I don't know if the company I work for has that capability, at least in Southern California. I'm sure we can, but just the people that we work with and the field superintendents that we work with and the field, like, I don't think they have that vision.
Do you think there's going to be there's going to be less people involved, I guess, if it's prefab, or more people?
Well, AI is right around the corner. I mean, sooner or later we're going to have a bunch of robots building buildings.
Yeah.
That's a possibility.
Yeah, I was getting into the robotics, some of the Japanese robots, and I was playing around with it. It's kind of interesting what they're capable of doing. It's actually fascinating. Moving on with your career, there's things that you feel like you still have to learn, or?
If you're not learning on a daily basis, you're not growing. So
Okay.
To answer your question, I'm learning every day. I mean, I literally learned today everything about podcasting, because here you are with all this professional gear. Like, I mean, I know everything. I know what this gear is. I mean, cameras and mics and everything, but like, I thought you were going to come with like a little boombox. And there is this contraption that I think I'm going to buy because it's super cool. I didn't even...
H6 Zoom.
Yeah, it's like...
Zoom recorder.
We're going to... Like, it can hopefully... I want to try to maybe record some of my DJ sets.
Right, we're going to get into that.
It's a pretty simple thing. So,
needless
to say, you learn every day, man. Like, I'm never going to stop learning. I'm very, very inquisitive. I love to ask questions. I mean, like...
Yeah.
I poke around everything. Like, my wife sometimes hates it because, like, we'll go into a restaurant and I'll start asking questions and looking around. She's like, "Oh, what are you doing? Stop!" Like, I don't care. Like, that's just how I am.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm gonna move on to the fun stuff. This is almost the end of the podcast. What is I know you're into electronic music. I'm into electronic music. Who's your favorite artist and why?
My favorite artist of all time is Armin van Buuren.
Okay.
He is the legend of trance music.
Have you listened to all his albums?
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Every
What's
album,
your favorite?
every track. I mean, Communications, his number one, or one of his first hits, came out in 1999. It's a classic. I have it on vinyl.
Vinyl, wow.
That's
pretty
cool.
Yeah.
I was a vinyl DJ that's how I started DJing. But yeah, there's a lot of older tracks that I liked by Armin. But I think outside of his influence on my life as it relates to liking him as a musician, I actually know a lot about him and his business dealings and him as an individual.
Oh, really?
That, the electronic music scene tends to have that negative vibe to it where it's just all about drugs and alcohol and stupidity, right? And it's unfortunate because when people find out that that's your scene or that's what you enjoy, they automatically picture that to you. So it's like, I don't take it personal because I really don't give a shit about what people think about me. Obviously, you know that. Like, I don't care. But what really stands out about Armin, as well as Tiesto, who's also been able to do it, is they've bridged the gap of time. I mean, these people have been around for going on 30 years now in the industry. and they've gone through waves of different types of music, but they've done it because they're professionals. Yeah. They're not just DJs. They really aren't. Armin actually is a lawyer. He passed the bar.
Yeah, I
and he is a very, very educated, successful individual. Yeah. And he has turned his passion for DJing to a multi-million-dollar business, and he employs hundreds, if not thousands, of people. And his number one goal is to keep the music going and keep the scene going by helping younger individuals that are in his position or the position that he used to be in become successful. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of people a lot of other DJs that he works with that he's been able to do that for. The same thing, he's not my favorite, but he's probably my second favorite, is Tiesto. He's been around just as long as Armin has, and they started together back in the early 90s. They're both from the same area in the Netherlands, which is kind of crazy how all these DJs are from the same 100-mile radius.
It's the cold weather, I think. People just don't go outside.
There's something in the water. That's what they say. That's the joke.
Yeah.
But he's also been able to do it, and there's been so many artists that have run through their talents that they've been able to touch and been able to influence. And I think that's the reason why I enjoy his music even more. And he tries to keep it real. He tries to stay to his roots. He's not opinionated. He's very disciplined. Mm-hmm. He always takes his time with his family. He's been through his ups and his downs. He's written articles about battles with depression and understanding the turmoils of the industry. Yeah. So, outside of him being my favorite artist, there's a lot more behind it, which I can respect. And being in the industry and understanding and loving the music kind of falls back to that, if that makes sense.
Okay. What festivals have you gone to that really resonated with you?
I've been to a lot of shows and festivals, Dish.
Okay. Anything notable?
A lot. I wouldn't be able to tell you all of them.
Any notable ones?
Hundreds.
I know.
Maybe not thousands, but I've been going to shows. I didn't do it when I was in high school. In high school, I was DJing and I was working. I wasn't really enjoying the scene. I was more I was a part of the scene.
Part of the scene, yeah.
Same through college. Yeah. And then once I got my professional career, I actually stopped DJing. And I don't really DJ that much anymore. I just mess around. But now I enjoy it. I'm more of a fan. And right now, I'd probably have to say that the number one experience that I had was probably when I went to Amsterdam to see Armin.
Did you see him?
Yeah, I saw him at a private event on a Friday, and then I saw him at a festival on Saturday.
Okay.
I actually went to Amsterdam to one of his festivals with my wife. My wife doesn't like the music. She enjoys some of it, but she's obviously not as much into it as I am. Mm-hmm. So she didn't go to the show with me, but I went with a buddy of mine, and he was super excited to go to the show, but he was too hungover. So I went to the show by myself, that's the only festival and the only show I've ever been to by myself, and it happened to be in Amsterdam. But everybody that was there was from all around the world. It was such an experience. It really was. So that was cool. Another experience that stands out for me is Ultra Music Festival in Miami.
Right.
Which is world famous.
Yeah.
That was an experience. It really was.
When was this?
It was probably 5 or 6 years ago now. I went with my wife and my roommate.
Yeah.
And it was an experience, that's for sure. We saw a lot of different DJs, and we actually saw Armin play at an after party at this venue called the Maps Backlot, and that was pretty cool. I remember that. That was quite a cool experience. Another festival that I remember that's kind of not so much trance was Swedish House Mafia.
Right.
A lot of people know who Swedish House Mafia is, but there was a tour that they did called the One Last Tour. And one of their shows was here in Los Angeles at the LA Historic Park. And I would say that was probably one of my top 3 shows of all time. It was quite an experience. And the cool part about it is they actually put out an album of that show live. So I bought it. So it's like I can listen to it anytime.
Yeah.
On my phone. But I was actually there too.
Yeah, I think they did split up. This was a long time ago. It's like 2012, I think they split up, or 2011.
Yeah. They were good. Yeah. It was very disappointing on how things played themselves out. And obviously they got back together. They're back together now.
Yeah.
I went and saw them in LA when they played recently. Good show. It was fun.
Yeah.
But not the same. Nothing will live up to that show that I saw them at. I feel like their one last tour and that show was just like they made it epic just because they weren't intending on ever coming back. But when the well runs dry and they run out of money, everybody changes their mind.
Okay. You're married. You have a great family. What's your advice on people trying to find love? What is the meaning of love to you in terms of friendship love or romantic love in your life? What has that?
The easiest way to explain that, at least for me personally, is don't look for it. Because I didn't. When I was in my 20s, I had a good time. And on my 30th birthday, I was at a bar hanging out with my buddies, and my wife popped into my life. I wasn't planning on it. It just happened. I feel like in this generation of Tinder and Hitch and all these dating apps, people try too hard. Just live your life. Things will fall into place. I mean, it's bound to. You have to put yourself out there, which, I mean, you don't sit in a closet and live in a hole. You got to be social. You got to do things. You got to make friends. But when it comes to love and romanticism, at least for me personally, I'm not a romantic person at all, but I found my wife by not doing anything. So that would be my recommendation. Just be yourself.
And I'm going to conclude this podcast with something deeper than everything we talked about. What do you think is the meaning of life?
Just be happy. Like, try not to live your life negatively with negative connotations. Try to be positive. Live your life to the fullest. Don't hold back. Don't have any regrets. Like, we joke about this. We worked with each other now for, let's just call it 8 months, right?
Right.
We saw each other on a daily basis, but you saw the way that I conduct myself in an office setting and the way that I conduct myself on a daily basis, at least professionally, because that's how you know me. But like, I didn't go into these situations on a daily basis like being negative. It's just got to be positive. So if you go into your life not being positive and thinking that the world's ending every 5 minutes, then you're just not going to be happy.
So the meaning of life to you is just be happy, do great work, and just continue doing it.
Work hard, live your life to the fullest. Don't try to find love. Let love come to you. If you're fortunate enough to be able to have that in your life, maybe have kids. Respect the people who got you to where you're at. A lot of people in this world don't have relationships with their parents for, sometimes for unfortunate reasons. But sometimes that's not the case, and people just don't try. Like, you got to remember that these are people that got you to where you're at for a reason. So you need to respect them and love them and give back. It's important.
Okay.
But I appreciate it, Dish. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you for listening to this podcast with Robert Mosqueda. If you like this podcast, please consider subscribing and liking on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, and consider supporting me in the link below.